Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Have a seat. One thing we wanted to ask, just a show of hands, how many people have already seen the film beginning to end?
Okay.
It looks like about 1/5 of you. So
Okay.
we might,
That's helpful.
which I want to check in with you on how you're feeling about spoiler alerts. I mean, because things do happen.
The only spoiler let's not give away is what the outcome of that certain battle that occurs in the latter part of the film.
You mean the one about, okay.
Yeah.
So there's a battle, but there's a lot. This is a film that has so much texture, and it's fantastic. I just want to say, and the thing that really grabbed me and touched me about it is that it's got a kind of Frank Capra-esque take on the little guy. It's the workers, regular folks became your characters, your heroes. Absolutely on purpose, I'm assuming.
Well, we live in Dayton, Ohio, so those are our neighbors. We're not a film crew that flew in from New York or LA to film in a factory. We are rooted in that community, my partner Julia Reichert and I. And we had made an earlier film in that same factory. It was a GM plant. It was a GM plant, this huge structure, bigger than the US Pentagon, at one point employed 6,000 people. And these were good jobs. I mean, people were making enough that they could own a home. They had a middle-class life, but it was like a blue-collar middle class. That plant closed, and when it was closing, we made a short film that's on HBO called The Last Truck. It's about the closing of the GM plant. So when this...
And there literally was a last truck.
There was, yeah. And the power... that film is about what it means to have a job you care about, a job you love, and what it means to lose it. When that last truck was coming down the conveyor and everyone was assembling it, there was no other vehicles, and everyone just started following this last truck. It became like this line of people. So that film, which came out in 2010, sort of is a precursor to this new film. That factory was empty, huge plant, empty in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio, for years. And then the word gets out that a Chinese billionaire had bought it and is going to reopen it and bring jobs back to Dayton. And one thing led to another, and we were suddenly in there filming, the beginning, the birth, the rebirth of this factory.
And there was such optimism on both sides. As you point out, the workers needed work. They were struggling. They were offered deals that were far less generous than they'd had when GM was running the place, but they stepped up. It was way better than nothing, and there was almost a sense, and they were sold on the idea by the Chinese that we're going to build this together. This is almost startup kind of feeling that they were given.
And I think, that feeling was very genuine and sincere on both sides. About 300 Chinese engineers and managers came over from Fujian province to set up this factory. This is late 2014, early 2015. We started filming in February 2015. And actually, the original idea, so the chairman, Chao Dawang, the owner, founder, CEO of Fuyao, the company's called Fuyao, he said to Julia and me, I want to hire you to make this movie. And we said, well, no, we don't want to do that. If we do that, then it's like an infomercial for your factory.
You'd be working for the man.
So we said, we'll do it. We want to do it. It's a powerful story. It's going to be a big story. We'll do it if it's an independent film that we own. We take no money from you, and we have to have full editorial control. And to his great credit, the chairman said, let's do it. Mm-hmm. He took a real risk on us. It's not very many American corporations would allow an independent documentary crew to run around, right, and film unfettered, especially for like 3 years. But the optimism of the early days made it easy to say yes, because it was like this big multinational adventure that was beginning.
And he wanted to prove something himself.
Yeah, he did. Fuyao Glass is the largest manufacturer of automotive glass windshields in the world by far, and they have like 20 factories in China, they have factories in Germany and Russia, but he wanted to plant a flag in the Midwest. We live on right on I-75, so there's we've got Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky. We've got Ford plants, Honda plants, Toyota, Subaru, GM, Chrysler, Jeep plant in Toledo. There's so many automotive need for automotive glass along that corridor. And he said, I'm going to do this And his family said, you know, Dad, you're getting old. You don't need to do this. You don't need to prove anything. You've already got the biggest glass company in the world. And he said, no, I want to do it. It's a vast market, and we're gonna succeed in America.
And it was making glass make sense in that setting because they were making basically windshields, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
You know, you go from raw sheets of glass, and there's this whole process where it becomes tempered, so it doesn't shatter on your lap if you have an accident, and all that stuff. Yeah.
So it's not giving much away. Things begin to go wrong.
Yes.
There's a culture clash, and it's so vividly illustrated when there's a class given for the Chinese engineers who have come over, several hundred of them, are sitting in a class, and there's a PowerPoint presentation about what Americans are like. And some of the points that I recall are, they're very informal about their attire. If it's, the guy says, if you were walking on vacation in Europe behind somebody who's wearing shorts and sports shoes and a vest, that's definitely an American. And they have fat fingers. They don't like abstractions or I saw people now looking at their fingers. They don't like abstractions. What else?
Theory. Yeah,
Theory.
Americans dislike theory in their normal.
Oh, and they shower
everyday
their
lives.
kids with so much encouragement
Yes.
that they need to be constantly flattered all
Yes.
the time.
Yes.
You know what? Nailed us.
Yeah, and you know, when we were filming those scenes, in the early days, we were an all-American crew. We had no idea what was being said, and then we get these scenes translated months later, and we're like, oh, that's what you were saying. So that was funny.
But what really began to go wrong?
Well, there were vast differences in expectations. So the Americans had been working in these industrial environments, and they saw, you know, when you work in a factory, you give your muscle, your sweat, your labor, your body takes hits. Over the years, so many factory workers I know have real injuries, but you traded that for a shot at a decent life, for like pay that was like $29 an hour. At GM, you could make $29 an hour. Now that would be like $60,000 a year, which in Dayton, Ohio, is you can buy a ranch home in a little mini subdivision, right? You can send your kids to college even if you never went to college yourself. You could have a shot at a life. But after GM closed, after Dayton and other industrial cities in the Midwest lost so much, the best jobs, the only jobs were often these warehouse distribution centers for like Payless shoes or Kohl's, and they were paying $9 an hour with no benefits. So when Fuyao came to town in 2014, late 2014, they said starting wages are going to be higher than what's normal. Mm-hmm. So the starting wage was $12 an hour. Now $12 an hour is like roughly $27,000 a year. And even in Dayton, Ohio, if you're 45 years old, if you have a kid, you can't live on $27,000 a year. You can't pay your rent or your mortgage. And that started, there was a lot of hope that the wages would go up, but that started to be a real sore spot. And then in terms of how people were treated, the cultural differences. In China, there's not this sort of like back patting, good job, kind of constant
Flattery.
Well, flattery, yeah, or appreciate. You could say flattery, but you could also say appreciation. Yeah. I don't want to judge it. It's just a different kind of culture. There's an expectation on the factories that we saw in China of just like, you do your job, I'll do mine. We can talk about it later over drinks. But in the U.S., people want to know why. Why am I doing this? What's the big picture? I want to know the big picture, right? And in China, I think people want to know why as well, but there's not a culture of asking. Right.
At a certain level, it felt that the American workers felt humiliated.
It got rough. Yeah. So here's capitalism is like a winch, right? It squeezes everything it can. And the plant was not making a profit fast enough. Mm-hmm. And so all that goodwill, that honeymoon phase in 2015 sort of started to fray into frustration. The Chinese were frustrated that the Americans weren't working fast enough. The Americans started feeling like the Chinese were just yelling at us all the time, and the goodwill evaporated, and then things got hard. Also, there were issues. There were safety issues. There were OSHA fines. There was such a drive to get this plant into profit that accidents started happening.
And the Chinese would not have had the same culture of accountability to safety concerns.
For example, in the factories in China, they don't wear safety glasses. And this is a glass factory. Glass shatters on a regular basis. We were filming in several Chinese factories. We didn't see anyone wearing safety glasses, and in the U.S. it's mandatory, and it's common sense. So there were issues like that, and that led to the workers saying, this is going crazy. Policies would change dramatically. All kinds of things were not going well, and the workers started to organize. They said, well, we're going to create a union of ourselves because we need more authority. We need to help run this place.
You have to watch the movie to find out what happened on that.
Yeah, well, it became a big battle.
I want to ask you if you want to join the conversation to use the Slido system now to get your questions in, and we'll try to work in a few questions. So toward the end of the film, this very casually callous scene takes place where the chairman is walking around the factory. There are far fewer workers on the floor in this, at least in this shot, but it implies that there are far fewer workers there anyway. And robots have begun doing, you can see literally the place where workers were standing, there are now robots doing the jobs that Americans had been doing. And the assistant is saying to the manager, we're going to be able to get rid of 4 more guys over there, and we can get rid of 4 more over there. And it was so sort of casual, just get rid of the workers and replace them. And following that, your film brings up sort of an epitaph that says 375 million workers worldwide in the next 10 years are going to have to find, they're going to find their completely new careers.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, automation is, as we all know, AI and automation is going to displace and disrupt millions and millions of people's jobs. For us, the big learning and the big takeaway for us on this question, it's not like we all know it's happening, it's going to happen, but how is it going to happen? How are we going to do this? And specifically, are working people, the people impacted, going to be part of the process of figuring this out? So we live in this time now where I feel, and Julia, we both feel this. We've seen workers not included in the process, at the table, in the room where it happens, to quote Hamilton. It's like you've got to. We just feel strongly that it's not going to go well. It's a potentially vast missed opportunity if working people are not brought into this process or approached to say, let's do this together. So, we've been lucky. This film came out in August. We've been getting to travel, and we've spoken at a number of conferences on the future of work. And the sad thing is that so few of them have worker presence in the room. So we were, just out of curiosity, we looked at the presenters and speakers at this conference for the last 3 years. And there was only, out of dozens of people who spoke and presented, I think there was 1 or 2 folks from working people, like worker organizations or labor unions. There's this sort of disconnect going on between the folks in this room, it feels like, who are grappling with the future of work, and labor unions, worker organizations, worker associations, people who are actually engaged with workers. Working people in factories who have unions, they elect representatives. Well, why can't a representative be, at this table?
We have a question. In a factory like the one in Dayton, what jobs would be considered safe from being replaced by either a machine or AI? Are there any?
That's a good question. Glass has to be inspected. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who look at and flip the windshields there, and it's a human eye in doing a judgment call. Is this glass good enough? But will AI develop so fast that it can look for blemishes and flaws in the windshield as quickly and as efficient, as accurately as a human can? I don't know that there's any of those jobs that are safe, actually. It's a good question. Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, I was also going to say, another thing we learned making this film was that once the workers got really frustrated and they started really clashing with the American workers were clashing with the Chinese management, there became a union battle, a battle to bring a union into the factory. And the Americans who had been advising the Chinese said to the Chinese leadership, you know what you have to do when your workers start to organize a union? You hire these American consultants to come in and teach your workers why unions are bad. And they brought in a company, a consulting firm, and we learned that there's dozens and dozens of these kind of consulting firms, and that basically any time there's a union battle, there is a huge campaign inside of a plant, a factory, to educate the workers about the ills of union membership. And what we saw was a vast, one-sided, lopsided messaging campaign to say unions are bad. You will lose your voice if you get a union. It was almost Orwellian, the language they used. And you might lose pay, which is statistically so not true. All kinds of things will go bad if you get a union.
And the drama of it is that some of that was surreptitiously recorded.
Yes.
So it's got that.
We have a scene
Yeah.
where a worker gave me an audio recording of one of these closed-door mandatory sessions that the union avoidance consultants did. And it's really sad, it's kind of funny, it's painful to hear all the messaging that's said. We didn't solicit that, but for the record, I have to say, we never hit a microphone, and we didn't solicit that, but they saw that we were filming and a worker gave me that audio.
But it got into the movie. The movie is on Netflix. I recommend it to everybody. Steve, thank you very much.
Are we already?
for
No,
coming.
we're not done.
We are.
No.
Yeah, we are.
Oh, come on, we're just getting started. Okay, thank you.